Steve Colhagen stumbled on a historical mystery while reading the nonfiction Blood and Thunder by Hampton Sides. The official account of the death of Santa Fe Provost Marshal near the Hubbell Trading Post didn't quite ring true for him, especially because Mr. Cummings was found with about $1 million in his saddlebags. Colhagen started digging, and the result is a novel with a mix of real and fictional characters set in New Mexico around the Civil War. He sat down with NYF producer Megan Kamerick to tell the story.
Stephen, how did you stumble upon this historic mystery, or even decide that there was a mystery to find about Joseph Cummings?
Yeah, I was reading Hampton Sides' book Blood and Thunder, and I came across a passage where the Santa Fe U.S. Marshal and Army Major was found dead in an arroyo. He reported directly to Kit Carson, and they hadn't been able to find any Navajos, and here was this soldier dead in an arroyo, and Kit Carson said he was killed by a concealed Indian, and I thought that was extremely improbable, especially given that he had about $750,000 to $1 million of current money in his saddlebag.
That would be the current value of what he had. Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot for a U.S. Army major.
So you thought there was something more to the story?
I thought there was more to the story, and then I started researching Cummings, and I found out he was a known womanizer and gambler, and not much of a fighter, who suddenly, when the Texans left New Mexico at the end of that Civil War out here, suddenly became the U.S. Marshal and an Army Major.
So was it this period in New Mexico that interested you, around the Civil War, the territorial period, or was it this kind of mystery that you wanted to track down?
No, I'm interested in Southwest history, and I just stumbled on the mystery.
Okay.
I stumbled on it.
Talk about this period of time in New Mexico, why it's such a great backdrop.
It's a great backdrop, thank you. You're in the middle of the accidental wars with Cochise, Chiricahua Apaches. You're in the middle of the Navajo wars, which are constantly ongoing in that period. And you basically suddenly have the Texans attacking the territory of New Mexico and Arizona as a part of the Civil War, which was a terrible mystery to the Indians as to why now suddenly
the white people were fighting each other?
The white army was fighting in themselves, and so you get a timeout, if you will, on the Indian Wars, and then all of a sudden General Carleton came with the Union troops from California, and it all started right back up again, where it left off.
So you started looking to Joseph Cummings, and this novel revolves around con artists, including Cummings, as well as people at Kit Carson. So you're questioning Kit Carson's telling of his death is brave and
lamented.
And lamented. So were you worried that you were calling Kit Carson a liar?
No. I wasn't worried about that. I suspect that what happened is that somebody came into camp and said, Cummings is dead up in Arroyo, and they went up and checked it out, and there he was, and there was his horse, and there's some mysterious mention of a unarmed white man that was with him that's never explained, and I suspect that in the middle of looking for the Navajos and in the middle of pursuing a scorched earth policy against the Navajos, he just didn't have time to deal with it. Here's a dead Army major who he knew to be reckless, and so he just chalked it up to he was probably killed by an Indian, put it in the Army records, and moved on.
So Cummings is real, Carson is real. Are these other people around this, are they made up, or are they real?
The most interesting character is Augie Demars, who is a con artist and a swindler and a womanizer and a poker
and a really bad
gambler.
shot.
And and I don't know whether he's a good guy or not, but I know he was a con artist and a swindler. And when I researched him and found out about him, he became a lieutenant, and he bizarrely became the aide-de-camp to General Canby, the head of the Union Army. And so, and from that position, he stole more than 20 million real dollars from the New Mexico territory, the church, and the U.S. Army.
So that's established.
That's established. Absolutely, those were his thefts. And when when the California Army came to New Mexico in 1862, Canby was relieved of his command, was brought back to Washington, and he took Demars back with him. And then when it came time for Carleton, when all of the thefts came to light and found out that millions of dollars was missing, and they found out who did it, they sent Cummings after him.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that was what my research discovered. They sent Cummings after him, despite the fact that it's quite clear they knew each other. And Cummings came back New Year's Eve, 1862, 1863, to report to Carleton. Couldn't find him. So he had $1 million in his saddlebag when he was found dead.
So you're doing historical fiction. I'm interested in kind of the ethics or how you do historical fiction, because you have a narrative you want to tell, but you also have to stay true to history, unless you're doing alternative historical fiction or speculative fiction. But I don't think that's what you're doing here. This isn't an alternative history.
No.
So how do you sort of balance those two things?
I spent a couple of years doing research, and I tried very, very hard to stick to the historical characters, to who they were and what dynamic they were involved in. And I was as surprised as the readers are going to be to discover that the Navajos were the bad guys in the 1860s, because that's not what we think today in the 21st or 22nd century, wherever we are. And that Kit Carson was a very sympathetic character, which I did not come in expecting. And so I stick as closely as I can to who Cochise really was as the head of the Chiricahuas, who Geronimo really was, who Jack Swilling really was, who's a minor character in the book, but later, after the book, goes on to actually be the founder of Phoenix, Arizona. So there are all these really interesting characters.
So the Navajos, you're talking about before the Long Walk and sort of the scorched earth policy.
Right.
Okay. One of the primary actors, and actually I think the smartest one so far, is a woman.
Right.
Con artist, former prostitute, card dealer, Lily Smoot. How did she come into the story?
She's
not real, right?
She's not real. She's fictional. Actually, the front of the book has the real characters and the fictional characters. One of the reviewers who recently wrote a review of the book said, "Thank God Colehagen did this, because I would have been Googling Lily Smoot for days and couldn't find her." Lily Smoot was a minor character. It was dealing poker and who met Demores and Cummings in the book. And one of the things that I've discovered, and I think most fiction writers will admit, is they don't actually write their books. The characters write the books. And Lily Smoot actually took over my book. She took over the real life con artist. She took over Cummings. She took over Demores.
And she took over you?
And she took over me. And she took over my book. It's her book.
So what lessons did you take away about history, about New Mexico, doing this book?
I think the history of New Mexico is really, if you go back to 1861 when the book opens, there are a very relatively small number of New Mexicans, which were really descendants of the Spaniards and the Pueblo Indians. And New Mexicans today, that's where they come from, and that's their heritage. And they were largely agrarian, largely common people who were constantly being harassed by Apaches, by Navajos, by the whites when they came in the late 1840s. And so the history of New Mexico is ultimately the U.S. government and the U.S. Army bringing some semblance of peace to keep the Navajos away from raiding the other people. Now, the way they did it, one has to be very sympathetic with what General Carleton did in forcing the Long March and essentially a form of genocide, of killing off the Navajo and their way of life.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for coming and talking to us about this.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Hopefully that was interesting, helpful.
That's great.